So in this lecture, we'll start focusing on various types of portraits, mainly what I've referred to as documentary photography. So kind of like photojournalism in a way. Some of the photographers might have a specific interest or a specific goal in mind that they're doing with these. Basically, they're the different types of portraits that they're doing. So this one here by August Sanders, and it is on dealing with physiognomy, and that, hopefully I'm saying that right, that you basically, whatever your occupation is, you would take on these physical traits. So your job kind of dictate how you looked and how you appeared. So as part of many of the sort of pseudosciences at turn of the century, people were fascinated with, and basically another part of it was that if you were, I guess someone of lower class or lower class person, then you were actually de-evolving as a human, and there's just a lot of weird ideas being thrown around about in this case the Sanders photo, the physical traits, their physical features are dictated because that they're boxers. So of course all these, all this stuff been proved wrong, and they're just pseudosciences. They're not really based on anything fact. The next, the Manuel Alvarez Bravo, striking worker assassinated. So Bravo basically was, I guess you could say, hanging out with some people near a factory where there was a worker strike going on. They thought they heard some fireworks, and people ran to see what type of festivities were going on. But instead of fireworks, this person was shot in the head. So, getting into different sort of mentalities and sides of the labor disputes and all that. So in a way, Bravo didn't want to portray this person sort of as a martyr. He was just more recording the event, trying to capture this this guy that unfortunately just been assassinated. So he's not trying to glorify, or he's not trying to victimize or anything like that. He's just sort of showing what happened. And then Joseph Sudek, coming from the Czech Republic. For his photography, a lot of his other work that he was doing, the street photography and portraits and things like that. But then he sort of got more wrapped up into doing still lifes and vignettes. And vignettes are sort of they're like still lifes, but it's like still lifes with a whole bunch of stuff in them. And usually there's types of different meanings and things like that. So in this case, onions, we have just this simple still life, and a lot could be like the Weston's his photos, getting into the sort of abstract, even though it's sort of these recognizable objects, there's still sort of a abstract quality to them. And Jock Henry Lardigue, car trip, Papa at 80 kilometers an hour. So Lardigue was kind of interested in the way camera records certain things. And so trying to, capture this car in motion and sort of, tracking along with the car as it's speeding by, you get kind of this weird optical effect where, as you can see, the tire looks, abstract and distorted, and it's like it's leaning towards the right side, and the people there in the background, so because of that movement, they appear skewed and slanted to the right. So he was sort of fascinated with the way the camera creates its own sort of reality. It's its own reality of an image. And so these weird little optic effects that you get with the camera. And W. Eugene Smith, we looked at one of his photos before. I guess a couple of his photos. The war documentary photos of the Pacific campaign. So this one, after the war, Smith basically spent almost a month with this doctor. And so, this particular doctor was like a rural area. So it's like just, a couple of hundred patients, but sort of his area that he would have to cover would be, several hundred miles of area where he would have to cover, being this small town doctor. So he was just wanting to capture the moments and just capture the life of this particular doctor. And it was kind of interesting because World War II is when we had sort of the big second industrialization of our country, so a lot more people were leaving the farms and things like that for factory work. Suburbia and all that stuff starts to pick up. So the rural area is kind of forgotten, I guess you could say, in a way. So Smith wanting to go and capture and document and sort of retell this sort of forgotten part of America. And so some of the spreads of his time out there. And then Gordon Parks, African American photographer. Um, so for this one, he spent some time talking with this lady. Yes, it's a lady. I know there's sort of the unfortunate shadow where it looks like this person has a beard, but it's a lady. But their conversation was basically dealing with how their life is as African American during this time the in our country. And this particular worker was up in Washington D.C. and so after some time, Parks, so I really want to do this portrait of you, and they talked about it. And so sort of this spin on the American Gothic painting, kind of retooling it in a way with this lady, so that he purposely had her stand in front of the American flag and holding a broom and a mop. Basically, she was like a janitor, so she spent her days cleaning the office buildings. And so it's just kind of a statement on being African American in the United States, where unfortunately, as we kind of hit on before with the Robert Frank, the whole idea that they're still these kind of seen as second-class citizens and things like that. So kind of unfortunate, but sort of eye-opening the way Parks does his photo. And then Danny Lyon, Texas Prison Ramsey Unit. So he basically spent some time to see what life is like for prisoners. Or every now and then people are saying prison's like a country club and all this other stuff, and it's like, well, no, it's kind of not. So where I believe the story for this, someone in the particular unit was caught with some type of, I want to say illegal substance, but it might not, something that they shouldn't have had, basically. There's this whole long list of things you're not supposed to have. So then it becomes, where'd you get it, who gave it to you, and all that. And of course, we don't believe you, blah 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 blah. Then everyone in that cell block or the unit, they get to go outside. Nice Texas summer day, stripped down so that everyone can be searched and find out where the illegal item or against regulation item came from. And then Joseph Koudelka, Candice, so he spent a good deal of time, 60s and 70s, documenting the gypsies in Western Europe. Gypsies were still sort of a nomadic type of group. They still wandered around from place to place. And they had their sort of, distinct culture and visualizations of things. But oftentimes, they were looked down upon because of sort of their past, and they were always, sort of these easy target at times. So, basically wanting to prove these myths wrong, and sort of glorifying and humanizing these people in his portraits. And then Roy DeCarva, Dancers Uptown, Club Dance New York. So spending some time in New York City, in Harlem, and so just kind of documenting what was going on in Harlem. Some of the things going on in Harlem, starting in like 20s and 30s, where you get into the Harlem Renaissance, and there's this sudden interest in African American culture in some of the communities, mainly because of jazz. That was basically what started the big interest. Harlem was kind of one of the big epicenters for that. Louis Armstrong spending his time between New Orleans, Chicago, and Harlem. So a lot of the jazz clubs and things like that that were going on in Harlem. So DeCarva, going and just documenting and recording the events and stuff that were going on. So these dancers, where they almost kind of look like these silhouette cutouts that are just kind of printed on top, or almost kind of like painted. So it's almost like they don't look real. They don't look like they really belong in the photograph in a way. So it's very kind of strange and odd the way they are lit. But still, like I said, it's the whole idea of just looking at the community up there. And then Margaret Brooke White, her cover for Life magazine, back when it was only 10 cents. So Fort Peck Dam, 1936. So during the Depression era, trying to get things back going again, jobs for Americans. But at the same time, it's sort of like the modern America, the modernization of things. So this particular image, she's trying to show that modernization of America, and sort of things that are coming in America. And also breadline during the Louisville flood in Kentucky. So I think this one kind of speaks for itself. So she felt that kind of this ironic moment. Here are these people lined up to get their bread, obviously, to get their food, standing in line, and here's this billboard right behind them. World's highest standard of living. Of course, during the Great Depression, where there's not a whole lot of things. Talking about the highest standard of living, all these people money that live in America. It's the American way, and then you can see the people on the billboard. So, yeah. Um, yeah. So, I think we can all figure this one out. Um, no. You probably spend a whole class on just this one. Um, Clearly, this one would be something much better to where we could have an actual discussion and talk about it, not just listening to a lecture. Um, well, that's the downside is not being able to have that actual discussion. Because there should be that discussion on this. Why, just why? Um, Very unfortunate. Uh, and like the Robert Frank, there's still images that, regardless of when they were taken, they sort of transcend that particular moment. Um, Even though this photo was taken back in 1937, how valid of an image uh, is it today? Does it still hold the strength? Um, the unfortunate irony, is it still there? Does it still hold that? So, like I said, it's something better that if we could discuss it as a class. Also, Burke White. During the war, she ended up, doing helped doing a piece on Joseph Stalin. Of course, at one point we're good buddies with Stalin. Not as much kind of got out of all the horrendous things that he was actually doing in Russia. But yeah, he was seen as an ally. He was seen as a good friend. Um, Before it really got into the big communism scare, thanks to him. Uh, but So Burke Wright spending first part of World War II over in Russia and sort of getting images from the Russian point of view of World War II. So it was one of the bombing in Moscow. So, and then the German civilians made to face their nation's crime in Buchenwald. So a lot of belief is, these concentration camps, like way out, uh, just way out. They, take over some little bitty town that's kind of way out, countryside. No, they were, basically, oh, there's a school over there. Uh, it's got all the big fields and all that stuff, so the school building itself can be used for the kind of administration centers and house the soldiers and things like that. And out here on the fields here, we can start building the housing for the prisoners. So the concentration camps, they basically were in the middle of towns, and a lot of people, turning a blind eye to what was going on in their towns. So one of the things the Americans would do is they basically made the civilians of the town come in and do the dirty work, cleaning up, uh, and just, showing them what, was actually going on that they were trying to pretend did not happen. Also, one of her other portrait of Gandhi during his hunger strike, where he was speaking out against the English English occupation of India, and so of course he did the peaceful revolts, uh, hunger strikes, and all kinds of different campaigns. Partly to let India rule itself without this foreign invasion. Robert Desaneaux, Kissed by Hotel de Ville. Probably some of you probably familiar with this one. It's pretty kind of the iconic, you know, couple in love in Paris. Desaneaux happened to notice this couple and kind of follow them around and took some pictures of them whenever they would kind of stop and kiss, and a few times kind of asked them to if they could kiss again. So just like I said, sort of this iconic image of young love, or love in Paris, what have you. He just happened to capture this moment of this couple. And then finally, Elliot Erwitt, Little Tiny Dogs, because why not? I mean, man's best friend. We all love dogs, right? Thought it was kind of a fun little picture to show. All right, so post in the discussion, and that's it for this week.